Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? And that's the common narrative. You are built to fail when you come out of prison. That is just the way the system is because it wants you in there because then you make money. That's the truth of it, right? How do you sustain this hope that you have once you find yourself back in the real world?
So you're right. Usually people go back. And number one, I knew I did not want to be a statistic and I would do anything I could not to be. Um, Adjusting to being home was really, really hard. The word institutionalized is real. Um, I came home and I had developed a lot of, for me, I look back and there were survival skills. I know that you've talked a lot about like the perfectionism, a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors. And a lot of it was me, it gave me a sense of control and it almost gave me a sense of calmness for a really long time. I think they served me really, really well. I thought that it's interesting when you're in it, you think that you're adjusting well until you have a few years to reflect back. But I do think that I really just wanted to come home and work hard. I was really fortunate that the company that I worked for before I went to prison gave me my job back. So, number one, I had an extreme amount of gratitude to them. And then they also gave me an opportunity. It was a fine dining steakhouse. So, in the hospitality industry, which I love that the hospitality industry gives people chances. I can definitely say for people that have been incarcerated that you have an opportunity to grow and it does allow you to learn skills along the way. So, um, they made me a private dining coordinator with the possibility of becoming sales manager if it went well. And I just had so much fight in me at that point that I worked my ass off for that job. And I slept and breathed working and just being successful. I just wanted to be self sufficient. And also, I wanted to be a contributing, person to society. So I used to use a language that I got really lucky to have those opportunities, but I'm learning that those opportunities came from how I showed up and how hard I worked. So I'm really learning to take ownership of that. And it it ended up going really well. Work was going great and I was starting to rebuild. And then shortly after that, I met my husband. So you know, everything on the outside was going as planned, if not better than I could have ever expected. But I still had a lot of those self limiting thoughts that I didn't deserve everything that I was receiving and that at any moment it could be taken away. And it has taken me years to work through that.
Yeah, and it does take years and it takes patience. And there is something to be said about I think that one of the big misnomers in the world just as a whole is people feel like they're deserving of things. But I think the reality is you have to earn every inch, every single day. And then the hard part about that is when you come from a background in which you've been told you're not good enough, smart enough, capable enough, pretty enough, whatever enough, there's always those moments of those limiting beliefs and the self-doubt and the shadow self and that part of you that even though you go through trial after trial after trial and you have these moments where you reach up and you grab that brass ring and you're like, yes, I'm victorious, it still goes, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not capable enough. And working through that is, I think, probably the greatest challenge that we face as human beings. There's nothing, in my opinion, more difficult than getting to the place where you put your feet on the ground and you say, I love myself. And that's so much of this journey. That's so much about what life is, because you have to be able to get to that place to actually create real sustainability, because until you're there, you're a little bit trapped, right? You're still always in the vortex. And that was my experience. I had the cars and the clothes and the women and all the things, but I was miserable inside because I hated my reflection in the mirror. And justifiably so. Like, realistically, I'd put myself in that situation. I had made my choices And I had to suffer the ramification of that. The harder part of it is the upswing, right? Where you're looking at, and you're going, doing all the things, I'm doing all the things, but still that little voice, right? That little piece that's there. What you're doing now is such a juxtaposition of where you started this journey, right? Or and really your whole life, to be in this place where you are, for lack of a better term, in service. Talk to me about where that comes from, what inspires that, and what your hopes are with what you're doing now.
It's funny that you say in service because that's really been something that has stayed with me a lot this year. And my declaration of right now is I want to be of service to others. And to be able to be of service to others, I've had to step into a place of forgiveness. And I think that you're just like you said, we had all the things, we moved, we had the beautiful life, great house, great husband, but something was still missing. I remember there was a moment, I had a few on my knees moments where number one, we were supposed to write a letter to somebody that we were angry at, and I wrote it to myself. And that was an aha moment for me. I was in a, self-improvement course, and I couldn't think of anybody else that I was angry at. And I was like, so I wrote it to myself, and then we had to read it back to someone else. And both of our eyes got really wide, and she was really confused. And I was just like, man, I hate myself. And that was a moment for me because up until then, I don't think that I knew that. And I remember reading the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm a big disassociator. So I think that I just moved on. I was like, if I do all these things, if I do all the right things, and everything will just fall into place. And it just wasn't. In learning the science behind how trauma affects the body, it just lit something in me that I was like, I need to get a handle on this. And I do remember having a moment one night where I was on the floor in my kitchen telling my husband that he was going to check me in somewhere for a little while, and that I was going to go away and really work on my trauma. And I was being a little bit dramatic, but in that moment, I committed to my healing. And that's ultimately when I found Illuma and therapy. And I made a commitment to sitting in the mess, really. I knew that it wasn't going to be pretty. I never wanted to get that messy. I just wanted to keep sweeping it under the rug. But I had to give myself space to work through it in order to be able to show up for others. And that's been the only way that I've been able to keep showing up for others, is working on myself.